Welcome to the Bible Based Believer. I am your host, Christopher Havard. This is the inaugural episode. Hopefully, I've come up with a great thumbnail and a fantastic intro song or something like that. I don't know. We're working on it, man. I really feel more driven to do this than possibly I've ever felt with any other podcast I've been a part of, right? For those of you guys that don't know me, like I said, my name is Chris Howard. I am a 31-year-old believer that is tired of the status quo when it comes to Christianity, the status quo when it comes to being a believer of Christ, and ultimately, you know what I mean, in the effort to try and find, the people who are actually seeking to please God and live according to the Bible. I ran into a roadblock, right? And in that roadblock, I just noticed that there were an absolute ton of people who did not know what they were talking about and a ton of people who were twisting things for their own agenda. But in that, I figured, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you want to see the world be a better place, be the change you want to see in the world. So I was like, man, I've been doing podcasting here and there for some years. I've had multiple that I've started and stopped, some that were successful, some that weren't. I've been on radio shows here and there randomly and things of that nature. So one of the things is my dad has always asked me why I haven't ever used my biblical knowledge in a podcast format, and it was just because I really didn't know how to do it. And to this point, I still don't. Right, like I said, this is me kind of giving it a go. But at the same time, I want to kind of start by, I guess, setting the purpose and the theme. Right, you know what I'm saying, as we go forward, as we have these episodes, I really do want to help guide those who are new to the faith, possibly answer some questions for people who've been asking questions and not finding answers. I don't necessarily want to be the one-stop shop. Like, I don't want this to be your Sunday sermon. I don't want this to be, you know what I'm saying, the place that you go instead of going to church. I think going to church and fellowshipping with the body is imperative. It's a command that we were given, you know what I'm saying, to make sure that we get with the assembly. And as difficult as that may be, given that the assembly doesn't seem to be focused, I also want to make sure that it is, in a certain sense, relatable and digestible, so that, you know what I'm saying, the things that you're possibly facing, maybe this can be the thing that helps you get through your week. Um, and maybe this can help, you know what I'm saying, disparage, well, maybe it can help, you know what I'm saying, get rid of some of the things that are, I guess, hangups when it comes to being a believer. In addition, I do want to cover current events as they do occur, as I think they do pertain to the way we live our lives, right? Like, I'm not going to necessarily say that everything that happens in the world today we will be covering, but if things are sparking a conversation within the body, I want to make sure that we talk about it because, you know what I mean? I don't want it to be a thing where we're missing people. I want this to be a place where people who don't believe in God can listen and get an understanding of a Christian that makes sense. I want this to also be a place where, those who are just looking for something good to listen to that can edify the soul and kind of help reassure and realign you to the Bible and help, clear up some of the misconceptions. And then, like I said, man, we're going to enjoy this time. I don't want this to be a super legalistic thing. I don't want this to be, like I said, a sermon. It's really just going to be, this is X, Y, and Z based off of what the Bible says. So to start, I guess I'll give my testimony. You know what I mean? As a believer, I think it's important that we share these things. Probably not going to go into super duper detail just because I know that could take forever and getting down to the nitty gritty could really take a long time. But I do want to make sure that, we are familiar with each other, right? So, born in Mississippi, was born in Natchez, Mississippi, to a father and mother. I come from, I'm going to say, a medium line of preachers. I'm not going to say a long line. My grandfather was a preacher. My dad is a pastor currently. He wasn't when I was born, but very involved in the church from an early age. My mom's side of the family is very big on God and very, very, very strict when it came to making sure that you were involved in some shape or form with the church. In addition, um, my dad, as he matured and got older, he went from being a deacon to, of course, like I said, becoming a preacher. And in that, when he went into sort of his ministry, the family kind of went along with it. Up to that point, we had read the Bible fairly frequently. We were, every time the church doors were open, we were there for certain points. And my dad was real good about before we went to bed, we would read and understand the story. So we had that basis. Me and my brother had that basis, that foundation. Of God, of the stories of God, of kind of, what I mean, from a elementary level, right? We also had a ton of the Nest movies, which I wish they would bring those back. Those Nest movies were fantastic for giving just that perspective, and that cartoon kind of helped build, like I said, to add on to that foundation. Um, time as I got older, I became a drummer in the church, sang a lot in church choir. I'm saying? I'm a black kid from Mississippi. You know what I mean? Whatever it is that you would think somebody would do in church in the country, that's what we did. Eventually, my dad became a pastor of the church that he's the pastor of now. And in that, I would say from my spiritual standpoint, I wasn't saved. I've been baptized. But once again, like I said, anything you hear about people doing in country churches, we did it, right? Like, you get baptized at a certain age because you're old enough to be baptized, but for the most part, salvation really wasn't something that I really understood at any case. And then the whole time we've been going back and forth to summer camps. Shout out to Kids Across America, man. I really, really miss Kids Across America, but I was very involved in Kids Across America for a couple of years. And that was where I actually got saved. One night was sitting talking to my counselor. Don't remember his name. Not gonna lie to you. He was a Hispanic guy. Really, really worked. I mean, swole dude, man, ripped up. And he was talking about how he used to be addicted to drugs. And like I said, he gave me his testimony. And it really wasn't his testimony that did it, but it was just the way that he explained what salvation was that kind of made my mind say, you know what, baptism was cool, but obviously I didn't have my mind where it needed to be for this to be something that actually means something. You know what I mean? For it to be something that changes me. So, gave my life to Christ at Kids Across America in 2008. And then from there, went to high school and went right back to living like I was living, right? Because you're a kid, man. I was 13. I didn't really understand the ramifications of what had happened. But looking back on it, my life did get changed because from there, it was almost as if the expectations of people who didn't even know I got saved changed. I started to see things from hey, I need to be able to help, I need to be able to do, I need to be able to so on and so forth. So go through high school playing football, you know, using profanity, of course, chasing girls, this, that, and the third. Go to college, kind of continue the path. Um, and in throughout all of that, like I said, the only consistent thing was playing the drums and trying to be involved in church in some shape or form. But no personal study, no, I'd say no philanthropy, no real understanding of doctrine and principle, just 100%, just coasting through life, just doing what dudes do. And then I graduated college, went to North Alabama and completely kept on the same path. And then after about a year or so, I moved to Memphis. And that's where I'd say the biggest changes occurred, right? Moved to Memphis, was working for a major company. And while I was out there, really got involved in a small church and got involved in the drumming of that small church. Now, something that had been kind of given to me as a seed at this point was, what I mean, the understanding of you can't be in position of a church living any kind of way. Now, keep in mind the pastor at the church in Memphis was a younger guy, really cool dude, you know what I'm saying? But he did make sure that we understood that there was an expectation for us to live holy because what we were doing was ushering in the spirit. And if you're blocking the ushering in of the spirit, in a church setting where God wants to minister to people, so on and so forth, because you've come in with your eyes set on some girl in the crowd or something like that, or you're trying to show off and you're taken away from the service. You know what I'm saying? That was one of the first times I had heard that. And that was one of the first times that it had been expected of me to uphold that, right? Because, like I said, being in Mississippi, if you were cold at anything, they kind of put you at the forefront and you became kind of a feature. You know what I mean? Like I sing okay. So, like, of course, I sang a lot, and it was always a thing that, oh, the singing drummers here or the drummers here or something like that, right? Like I said, small church community, very country, wasn't a lot of things going on. But in Memphis, it wasn't like that. He was like, I will sit you down if you're not doing what you need to do. And in that, there was a revival that happened, and of course, I had a fake prophet come and speak over me and all this other kind of stuff. And she was like, in X amount of years, you're gonna do this, that, and the third. And really, what it was, I would say that kind of turned everything was I was experiencing the hardships of adulthood, right? Being young and 20 something in Memphis, trying to date, having a job as an engineer, and thinking like, man, I'm kind of over. I went through the college thing, man. I'd done all of the wild whatever I wanted to do at that point, and I was tired of running into the same thing over and over again, right? Like I was running into the same wall, whether it was financial, whether it was emotional, whether it was physical. Like I kept running into the same stuff over and over. And I've always heard people say, if you want to get something you've never had, you've got to do something you've never done. And then, of course, after seeing the fake prophet, you know what I'm saying, and seeing that prophecy not come to fruition, because of course I tried to pursue it the way that the lady told me that it was going to work, you know what I'm saying? But it's like it just never really panned out. And I put effort into it and everything, but it didn't really pan out the way I thought it did. There was some success, but I think that came more from me focusing on the work, because what she did was she gave me this idea that it was going to be so grandiose in X amount of time if I put the work in. I did that, didn't happen. Anyway, but I was like, there's got to be something to this, because there's no way that what I've been taught this whole time is a lie. So ultimately, I just told God, I kind of challenged God, right? And I'm not gonna say I recommend that people do it, but I was like, if this is really what you got for me to do, then let me do it, right? Like if walking your path is what's supposed to be the case, if being a believer is really what it is, if you are who you say you are, so to speak, show me. You know what I'm saying? And then from there, I was like, I'm willing to put aside my, I'm gonna call them what they are, my whorish ways. I'll put those aside. I'll put aside my selfishness. I'll put aside whatever it is I need to, if this is what you have for me. Like, if this is where you really want me to be. And in that, I started to really feel the change and really feel the spirit, in the sense of I felt a pulling away from old things and a perspective shift towards the things that I was supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? I met my wife, we got married. So that was one of the things that got aligned and marked off the list. I found a new job that got aligned and marked off the list. I wanted to move into Virginia because my wife is in the military. You know what I'm saying? So that was a fresh start to get away from the old things to kind of help me, you know what I'm saying, center my mind. And in that, you know what I'm saying, like of course new challenges arise. So like I said, that was in 2021 and 2022. And then now here we are in 2025, you know, and in the last couple of years, there's been a lot more of an emphasis for me to actually study the Bible and study the word in and of itself, right? No extras, none of this, you know what I'm saying, super theological thinking, and none of this extra historical context, all this other kind of stuff. Like it's really just, what does the word say? Because there's so many times we hear people say stuff and then we don't really get the gist of what the Bible says about it, because we're just holding on to the colloquialisms. Um, in that, my dad has always told me that I was going to be a minister. I don't believe it. And the reason I don't is just because I don't feel called to minister in that way. Maybe this is, you know, some sort of bug or something like that, or a piece of that, right? Maybe this is what he was speaking to. My understanding was he was talking in a traditional sense, but I do think one of the things that he and I also share is there's a lack of feeding of the feeders, in a sense, right? Like if a pastor is supposed to be leading a flock of sheep, there's nobody who's ensuring that the pastors have what they need. And I found that to be the same case for a regular believer when you start going from church to church and place to place. Like I said initially, we've been looking for a church home. We've been up here for years, been looking for a church home this whole time. And every time we've looked for a church home, it's always come to the same issue. They're not preaching from the Bible. They're preaching from some little handbook they have, or some little snazzy slogan or something like that. And nothing really ever ties back to the word. So as I've studied the word and as I've learned the Bible and started to get more and more into the Bible, of course, I don't know everything. I really would say I know nothing more now than I knew then. I just know what the Bible says. As I've gotten further into it, it's become harder and harder for me to sit still and listen to people misquote, misjudge, and misrepresent the Bible. So, like I said, that's kind of where we are now. That's my, I'd say, the full synopsis of my testimony. Pretty boring, completely understand. Like I said, there's a lot more detail in there. As things become relevant enough for me to share them, I will share them in the episodes that they actually matter. But for the most part, it's no point in me breaking down everything like that. But like I said, I don't want to hold, you know what I'm saying, the time. I'm not just going to talk just to talk, right? Like there's no like time limit here, but at the same time, I also don't want to waste any. But hopefully as we, you know, start to explore some of these topics and explore some of the things that we explore, hopefully you guys can get a good perspective, a different perspective. Hopefully I can speak in an eloquent enough manner, you know what I mean, that people can actually understand me. But beyond that, I just want to make sure that it's an effective and a useful tool for people to use and listen to and come back to, right? Like I don't want it to be where you hear it once and all right, I never want to hear it again. Like I want it to be something where you can come back to it, something that you can listen to it and take little nuggets from, take notes in, things like that. Like I said, as I study the Bible, I'm currently studying through Hebrews. Um, as I study the Bible, I think it's very important that, you know what I'm saying, you take notes and try to find ways to reference it back to things that it does draw from. So we're going to do that same thing, right? Like I've got notes on things that I've taken that I want to make sure that we actually have the opportunity to come back and listen to or read together. And then in addition, there's also going to be little tie-ins that we do from modern day life to kind of make things. relevant presently, because I think that's another thing that people have is, you know what I'm saying, there's a lot of people who believe the Bible is just a historical book and not something that could be applied, but a lot of the Bible can easily be applied to today if we actually take the time to read it and understand what principle it's trying to teach. So, like I said, inaugural episode. I know this wasn't a good one. I get it. I understand. But at least you guys got to know me a little bit better. I will say if there are any questions burning on you guys' heart as it stands, you know what I'm saying? I always want to make sure that I'm available for people to ask their questions because that will give us the opportunity to explore things together. If there's questions that you guys have, feel free to send them to the Chris Havard Show at gmail.com. That's the email from my original podcast. I just never changed it, and I'm going to keep it the same just because I don't feel like making a new account. In addition, I am on TikTok at Chris Havard. That's the at symbol ChrisHavard. So you can kind of see some of the snippets of things I've talked about there. There will be a lot of things that I do reference back to there, meaning like the videos I've made on there are relevant for some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. So I will kind of use some of the same phrases or talk about the same things in the same manner because I still believe a lot of those things make sense. Um, Other than that, like I said, make sure you love somebody this week. Share the love of Christ this week. Make sure you visit your local body. And like I said, like, share all those great things for this channel, for this podcast, because we want to bring as many people into the fold as we can, but we want to bring them into the fold of Christ, not into the fold of self. So, like I said, I definitely appreciate the push. Um, but that'll be about it. So, like I said, this has been the inaugural episode of the Bible-based believer. I have been your host, Chris Havard. Peace.